The sun was merciless that August morning in 1882, when Samuel Keller spotted a lone figure working the fence line between his property and the old Kendrick spread. And something about the determined set of those shoulders made him rein his horse to a complete stop on the dusty Montana trail. He had been riding out to check on his cattle near the northern boundary of his ranch, a task that had become routine in the 3 years since he had settled in the territory outside of Ukiah. The town itself was small, barely 200 souls, but it served the scattered ranches and homesteads well enough. Samuel had purchased his land with money saved from years of working cattle drives from Texas to Kansas, and he had built his ranch from nothing with his own 2 hands. At 28 years old, he owned 2,000 acres of good grazing land, a modest herd of cattle, and a house that felt emptier with each passing season. The Kendrick place had been abandoned for nearly 6 months now, ever since old Thomas Kendrick had died without any known heirs. Samuel had heard rumors that some distant relative might claim the property, but he had not expected to see anyone out here, especially not someone working alone in the heat of the day. He urged his horse forward, curiosity getting the better of him. As he drew closer, he realized the figure was a woman, wearing practical trousers and a faded blue shirt, her dark hair tied back with a piece of leather cord. She was struggling with a section of fence that had come down, probably during the last storm. The posts were solid enough, but the wire had snapped in 2 places, and she was attempting to splice it back together with pliers and sheer determination. Samuel dismounted about 20 feet away, not wanting to startle her. "Morning," he called out, keeping his voice friendly. "That is some tough work for one person." The woman turned, and Samuel felt something shift in his chest. She was younger than he had initially thought, probably in her early 20s, with a face that was all sharp angles and determination. Her eyes were the color of pine needles, green with hints of darkness, and they regarded him with open suspicion. "Morning," she replied, her voice steady despite the obvious wariness. "I can manage." "Did not say you could not," Samuel said, walking closer but keeping a respectful distance. "I am Samuel Keller. I own the ranch to the east. Are you kin to Thomas Kendrick?" The woman studied him for a long moment before answering. "Jasmine Kendrick. Thomas was my uncle, though I only met him once when I was a child. He left the ranch to my father, but my father died 2 years ago. The lawyers finally tracked me down in Ohio last spring." Samuel nodded slowly, processing this information. "That explains why the place has been sitting empty. I am sorry for your losses." Jasmine turned back to the fence, clearly uncomfortable with sympathy. "Thank you. I arrived 3 days ago, and I have been trying to assess what needs to be done. The answer, as it turns out, is everything." Samuel could not argue with that. He had seen the condition of the Kendrick house and outbuildings when he had ridden past a few days earlier. The roof needed repair, the barn door hung crooked on its hinges, and the corrals were in sorry shape. "You planning to work the ranch yourself?" he asked. "That is the plan," Jasmine said, grunting as she pulled the wire taut. "I do not have money to hire hands, and I do not know anyone in Montana. So yes, myself." Samuel watched her struggle with the wire for another moment, then made a decision. He walked to his horse, retrieved his own work gloves from the saddlebag, and approached the fence. "Here, let me hold that section while you secure it. These old fence lines can be tricky." Jasmine looked at him with surprise. "You do not have to do that." "I know," Samuel said simply, "but it will go faster with 2, and I have some time before I need to check on my herd." She hesitated, then gave a short nod. "All right, thank you." They worked in silence for a while, falling into an easy rhythm. Samuel held the wire sections while Jasmine spliced them together, her movements practiced and efficient. He found himself impressed by her competence. She clearly knew her way around ranch work, which was unusual for a woman from Ohio. Most women he knew could handle horses and basic farm chores, but fence mending was typically men's work. "You have done this before," he observed. Jasmine glanced at him briefly. "My father had a small farm. After my mother died when I was 15, it was just the two of us. I learned to do whatever needed doing." "That is a valuable skill out here," Samuel said. "Montana is not forgiving to people who cannot adapt." "So I am discovering," Jasmine replied, a hint of wry humor in her voice. "The first night I arrived, I found a snake in the kitchen. The second night, the well pump broke. Yesterday, I discovered the roof leaks in at least 4 places." Samuel could not help but smile at her matter-of-fact tone. "Sounds about right for a place that has been sitting empty." "What did you do about the snake?" "Killed it with a shovel," Jasmine said. "Then I cooked it for dinner." Samuel laughed, a genuine sound that surprised him. He had not laughed much in recent months, and it felt good. "You are going to do just fine here." They continued working, moving down the fence line to the next damaged section. Samuel found himself stealing glances at Jasmine when she was focused on the wire. There was something compelling about her self-sufficiency, her refusal to ask for help even when she clearly needed it. He recognized something of himself in her, the same stubborn independence that had driven him to leave Texas and build a life on his own terms. "This section here is completely rotted," Jasmine said, pointing to a post that was leaning at a dangerous angle. "I will need to replace the whole thing." Samuel inspected it and nodded. "You are right. I have some spare posts back at my place. I could bring them over tomorrow if you want." Jasmine straightened, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. "Why would you do that?" The question was not hostile, just genuinely curious. Samuel considered his answer carefully. "Because out here, neighbors help each other. It is not charity, it is survival. When winter comes, you will be glad to have someone within riding distance who knows you are there." Jasmine regarded him thoughtfully. "And what do you want in return?" Samuel appreciated her directness. "Nothing right now, but when I need an extra hand during branding season, I might ask for your help if you are willing and able." "That seems fair," Jasmine said slowly. "All right, I would appreciate the posts." They worked through the morning, repairing 3 more sections of fence. Samuel learned that Jasmine was 22 years old, that she had sold her father's farm to pay his debts, and had used the remaining money to travel to Montana. She had arrived with 2 trunks of belongings, a little cash, and a determination to make the ranch profitable. Samuel found himself admiring her courage, even as he worried about her chances of success. Running a ranch alone was difficult for anyone, but for a woman without capital or connections, it would be nearly impossible. The sun was high overhead when they finally finished the section they had been working on. Jasmine stepped back and surveyed their work with satisfaction. "That should hold for now. Thank you for your help, Mr. Keller." "Samuel," he corrected. "Mr. Keller was my father and he has been dead for 5 years." "Samuel then," Jasmine agreed, "and you can call me Jasmine." Samuel mounted his horse, settling into the saddle. "I will bring those posts by tomorrow afternoon. In the meantime, if you need anything urgent, my place is about a 40-minute ride east. Follow the creek until you see a stand of cottonwoods, then head north. You cannot miss it." Jasmine nodded. "I will remember that. Though I hope I will not need to bother you." "It would not be a bother," Samuel said honestly. He tipped his hat to her and turned his horse toward home, but he found himself looking back once before she disappeared from view. She was already back at work, moving to the next damaged section of fence with the same determined energy. As Samuel rode home, he could not stop thinking about Jasmine Kendrick. There was something about her that had stirred feelings he had thought were long buried. He had been lonely for a long time, though he rarely admitted it to himself. After his father's death, he had focused entirely on building his ranch and establishing himself in Montana. There had been women, of course, brief encounters in town or at social gatherings, but nothing that had ever developed into anything meaningful. Samuel had told himself he was too busy, that he would think about marriage and family once the ranch was more established. But seeing Jasmine working alone on that fence line, so determined and self-reliant, had awakened something in him. It was not just attraction, though he could not deny she was handsome in an unconventional way. It was recognition, a sense that here was someone who understood what it meant to fight for a life you wanted, to refuse to give up even when the odds seemed impossible. Samuel spent the rest of the day working on his own ranch, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Jasmine. That evening, as he sat on his porch watching the sun set over the mountains, he made a decision. He would help her get the Kendrick ranch back in working order, not because he expected anything in return, but because it was the right thing to do. And if spending time with her happened to ease his loneliness, well, that was just a fortunate side effect. The next afternoon, Samuel loaded a wagon with 6 good fence posts, a coil of new wire, and some extra tools he thought Jasmine might need. He also packed a basket that his housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, had prepared. Mrs. Chen was a Chinese widow who had been working for him for 2 years, and she had raised her eyebrows when Samuel mentioned he was helping a new neighbor. A woman rancher, Mrs. Chen had asked in her precise English. "This is unusual." "She is unusual," Samuel had agreed, and Mrs. Chen had smiled knowingly before packing enough food for 2 people. When Samuel arrived at the Kendrick ranch, he found Jasmine on the roof of the house, hammering shingles into place. She looked up when she heard the wagon and carefully made her way down the ladder. "You brought supplies," she observed, walking over to inspect the wagon. "This is very generous." "Just being neighborly," Samuel said, climbing down from the wagon seat. "Mrs. Chen also sent some food. She insisted you must be tired of cooking for yourself." Jasmine's expression softened slightly. "That was kind of her. Please thank her for me." They spent the afternoon replacing the rotted fence posts, working in companionable silence broken occasionally by conversation. Samuel learned more about Jasmine's life in Ohio, how she had nursed her father through a long illness, how she had struggled to keep the farm running while he grew weaker. She spoke matter-of-factly about hardship, never seeking pity, and Samuel respected that. "Why Montana?" Samuel asked as they tamped dirt around the final post. "You could have started over anywhere." Jasmine paused, considering the question. "I wanted space. I wanted land that felt endless, where I could build something that was entirely my own. Ohio was full of memories, most of them sad. When the lawyer told me about the ranch, it felt like a sign." Samuel understood that. "I came here for similar reasons. After my father died, I could not stay in Texas. Too many ghosts." "You regret it?" Jasmine asked. "Not even once," Samuel said firmly. "This land gets in your blood. It is hard and unforgiving, but it is honest. You know exactly where you stand." They worked together several more times over the following weeks. Samuel would ride over in the afternoons after finishing his own work, and they would tackle whatever project Jasmine had prioritized for the day. They repaired the barn door, fixed the leaking roof, and rebuilt the corral fence. With each passing day, Samuel found himself more drawn to Jasmine. She was smart, capable, and possessed a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard and made him laugh. Jasmine, for her part, began to look forward to Samuel's visits. At first, she had been suspicious of his motives, waiting for him to ask for something in return or to make unwanted advances. But as the days passed and he remained respectful and helpful, she began to relax around him. She appreciated his competence, the way he could look at a problem and immediately know how to solve it. More than that, she appreciated his company. The loneliness of the ranch had been harder than she expected, and having someone to talk to made the work feel less overwhelming. One evening in late September, as they were finishing repairs on the barn, Samuel asked Jasmine if she would like to come to his ranch for dinner. "Mrs. Chen has been asking about you, and she has threatened to quit if I do not bring you by soon. She thinks I am being rude by not introducing you properly." Jasmine hesitated. She had been so focused on work that she had not thought much about socializing, but the prospect of a home-cooked meal and adult company was appealing. "All right," she agreed. "When?" "Sunday," Samuel suggested. "That gives you a day to rest, and Mrs. Chen will have time to prepare something special." Sunday arrived with clear skies and a hint of autumn chill in the air. Jasmine spent more time than usual getting ready, washing her hair and putting on one of the 2 dresses she had brought from Ohio. It was a simple green cotton dress, but it was clean and well made, and it brought out the color of her eyes. She told herself she was just being polite, but she could not deny the flutter of nerves in her stomach as she saddled her horse and rode toward Samuel's ranch. The Keller ranch was impressive. The house was larger than Jasmine had expected, a solid 2-story structure with a wide porch and well-maintained outbuildings. The corrals were in good repair, and she could see a substantial herd of cattle grazing in the distance. It was clear that Samuel had worked hard to build this place, and Jasmine felt a mix of admiration and intimidation. Samuel met her at the door, and Jasmine was struck by how different he looked. He had shaved and was wearing clean clothes, a dark shirt and trousers that emphasized his lean, muscular build. His light brown hair was neatly combed, and his blue eyes were warm as he smiled at her. "Welcome," he said, helping her dismount. "Mrs. Chen has been cooking all day. I hope you are hungry." Mrs. Chen turned out to be a small, energetic woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a warm smile. She greeted Jasmine with genuine pleasure, ushering her into the house and immediately pressing a cup of tea into her hands. "You are working too hard, Mrs. Chen announced, studying Jasmine critically. "Too thin. Samuel should be helping you more." "Samuel has been very helpful," Jasmine protested, but Mrs. Chen waved her hand dismissively. "Men never help enough," she declared, and Samuel laughed. Dinner was a revelation. Mrs. Chen had prepared a feast of roasted chicken, fresh vegetables from the garden, fluffy biscuits, and an apple pie that made Jasmine's mouth water. They ate at a proper dining table, and Jasmine was acutely aware of how long it had been since she had experienced this kind of domestic comfort. The house was warm and clean, with curtains at the windows and rugs on the floor. It was a home, not just a shelter, and Jasmine felt a pang of longing for something similar. After dinner, Samuel gave Jasmine a tour of the ranch. They walked through the barn, where he introduced her to his horses, and then out to a rise where they could see the full extent of his property. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the mountains in the distance were dark silhouettes against the brilliant colors. "It is beautiful," Jasmine said softly. "It is," Samuel agreed, but he was looking at her instead of the view. "Jasmine, can I ask you something?" She turned to face him, suddenly nervous. "Of course." "What are your plans for the winter?" Samuel asked. "I know you have been focused on repairs, but winter comes fast in Montana. Do you have enough supplies laid in? Enough firewood?" Jasmine had been trying not to think about winter. "I am working on it," she said, which was not really an answer. Samuel nodded slowly. "If you need help, I hope you will ask. Winter can be deadly if you are not prepared." "I will manage," Jasmine said automatically, then softened her tone. But thank you. I appreciate your concern. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the last of the sunset fade. Samuel wanted to say more, to tell Jasmine how much her company had come to mean to him, but he held back. It was too soon, and he did not want to scare her away. Instead, he said, "We should head back before it gets dark. The trail can be tricky at night." As Samuel walked Jasmine to her horse, she surprised him by reaching out and touching his arm. "Thank you for today," she said. "It was nice to feel like a person again instead of just a list of chores to complete." "You are welcome here anytime," Samuel said, and he meant it. "My door is always open to you." Jasmine rode home under a sky full of stars, her heart feeling lighter than it had in months. She had not realized how much she had missed human connection, the simple pleasure of conversation and shared meals. Samuel was different from any man she had known. He treated her as an equal, never condescending or assuming she needed to be protected. At the same time, he was unfailingly kind and helpful, offering support without making her feel weak. Over the following weeks, Jasmine and Samuel settled into a pattern. He would ride over several times a week, always with some excuse about checking fence lines or offering advice on winter preparations. They would work together, and afterward, they would sit on Jasmine's porch and talk as the sun set. Samuel learned about Jasmine's childhood, her love of reading, her dreams of building a successful ranch. Jasmine learned about Samuel's years on cattle drives, his difficult relationship with his father, his hopes for the future. One afternoon in early October, they were working together to stock Jasmine's root cellar when Samuel brought up a subject that had been on his mind. "The territorial fair is coming up in 2 weeks. It is in Ukiah, lasts 3 days. There are competitions, dancing, good food. I was thinking of going, and I wondered if you might want to come along." Jasmine looked up from the crate of potatoes she was sorting. "Are you asking me to accompany you?" "I am," Samuel said, meeting her eyes. "As my guest, if you are willing." Jasmine felt her heart skip. This was different from their work together or even the dinner at his ranch. This was Samuel making his intentions clear, asking her to be seen with him publicly. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, but caution held her back. "Samuel, I appreciate everything you have done for me," she said carefully. "But I need to be honest with you. I am not looking for a husband. I came to Montana to build my own life, to be independent. I cannot afford to be distracted." Samuel nodded slowly. "I understand that, and I respect it. But Jasmine, going to a fair is not a marriage proposal. It is just 2 neighbors enjoying themselves. You have been working yourself to exhaustion since you arrived. You deserve a break." Jasmine considered this. He was right that she had been working relentlessly, and the idea of a day away from the ranch was appealing. "All right," she said finally. "I will go, but as friends." "As friends," Samuel agreed, though the way he smiled made Jasmine's stomach flutter. The day of the fair arrived with perfect autumn weather, cool and crisp with brilliant blue skies. Jasmine wore her best dress, a deep blue wool that her mother had made years ago. She had carefully mended a small tear in the sleeve and had pressed it as smooth as possible. Samuel arrived in a wagon rather than on horseback, explaining that it would be more comfortable for the long ride to town. The territorial fair was larger than Jasmine had expected. The main street of Ukiah was crowded with people from surrounding ranches and homesteads, all dressed in their finest clothes and eager for entertainment. There were booths selling everything from fresh produce to handmade quilts, competitions for the best livestock, and a large tent where a dance would be held that evening. Samuel guided Jasmine through the crowds, pointing out people he knew and introducing her to his neighbors. Jasmine was surprised by how warmly she was received. Several ranchers' wives immediately took her under their wing, offering advice on surviving Montana winters and promising to visit once the weather settled. For the first time since arriving, Jasmine felt like she might actually belong here. They watched the horse competitions, where Samuel pointed out the strengths and weaknesses of various animals with the expert eye of someone who had spent his life around livestock. They sampled food from different booths, and Samuel insisted on buying Jasmine a ribbon for her hair from a vendor selling handmade goods. It was a simple green satin ribbon, but Jasmine treasured it because of the thoughtfulness behind the gift. As evening approached, music began to drift from the dance tent. Samuel looked at Jasmine with a question in his eyes. "Would you like to dance?" Jasmine hesitated. She had not danced since before her father fell ill, and she was not sure she remembered how. But the music was inviting, and Samuel was looking at her with such hope that she found herself nodding. The tent was crowded with couples, and a small band was playing a lively tune. Samuel led Jasmine onto the floor and took her hand, his other hand resting lightly on her waist. They moved together, and Jasmine was surprised by how natural it felt. Samuel was a good dancer, confident without being showy, and he guided her through the steps with ease. As they danced, Jasmine became acutely aware of Samuel's proximity, the warmth of his hand, the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the room. Something shifted in her chest, a feeling she had been trying to ignore for weeks. She was attracted to Samuel, had been from the beginning, but more than that, she cared about him. She valued his opinion, looked forward to his visits, missed him when he was not around. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. Jasmine had promised herself she would not let anything distract her from building her ranch, but Samuel was not a distraction. He was a partner, someone who made her life better without demanding she change her goals. As the music slowed and Samuel pulled her slightly closer, Jasmine allowed herself to lean into his embrace just for a moment. When the song ended, they stepped apart, both slightly breathless. Samuel's eyes were dark with emotion as he looked at her. "Jasmine, I need to tell you something." Before he could continue, a commotion erupted near the entrance of the tent. A group of men had arrived, clearly drunk, and they were being loud and aggressive. Samuel tensed, positioning himself slightly in front of Jasmine as they watched the scene unfold. One of the men, a big fellow with a red face and mean eyes, was arguing with the fair organizers. "I paid my entry fee and I will go where I please," he was shouting. "You cannot keep me out." "You are drunk, Jake," one of the organizers said firmly. "Go home and sleep it off. You can come back tomorrow." Jake lunged at the man, and suddenly fists were flying. Samuel quickly guided Jasmine out of the tent, away from the violence. "That is Jake Morrison," Samuel explained as they hurried toward the wagon. "He owns a small spread south of town. Good rancher when he is sober, but he has been drinking more since his wife left him last spring." The fight was quickly broken up by several other ranchers, and Jake was escorted away, still yelling and struggling. The incident cast a pall over the evening, and Samuel suggested they head home before anything else could happen. On the ride back to Jasmine's ranch, they talked about the day, carefully avoiding the moment they had shared on the dance floor. Samuel walked Jasmine to her door, and they stood awkwardly for a moment in the moonlight. "I had a wonderful time today," Jasmine said softly. "Thank you for inviting me." "I am glad you came," Samuel replied. "Jasmine, what I was trying to say earlier before we were interrupted is that I care about you, more than just as a neighbor or friend. I know you came here to be independent and I respect that, but I want you to know how I feel." Jasmine's heart was pounding. "Samuel, I care about you too. But I am scared. I have worked so hard to build this life, and I cannot afford to lose myself in someone else's plans. "I would never ask you to do that," Samuel said earnestly. "I do not want to take anything away from you, Jasmine. I want to build something with you, side by side. Two ranches, two independent people who choose to face life together." Jasmine felt tears prickling her eyes. "I do not know if I can do that. I do not know if I am strong enough to manage a relationship and everything else." Samuel reached out and gently took her hand. "You are the strongest person I know, and you do not have to decide anything tonight. Just think about it. Think about whether you might be willing to give us a chance." Jasmine squeezed his hand, then released it and stepped back. "I will think about it. Good night, Samuel." "Good night, Jasmine." Samuel rode home with his heart in turmoil. He had laid his cards on the table, and now all he could do was wait and hope. He had meant every word he said. Jasmine had become essential to his happiness in a way he had never expected. The thought of a future without her felt bleak and empty. Jasmine, meanwhile, lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling and replaying the conversation in her mind. She did care for Samuel, more than she had wanted to admit, but letting someone into her life felt risky. What if she lost herself, the way her mother had, always putting her husband's needs first until there was nothing left of her own dreams? What if Samuel changed, became controlling or resentful of her independence? But even as these fears circled through her mind, another voice whispered that Samuel was not like that. He had proven over and over that he respected her autonomy, that he saw her as an equal. And the truth was, she was tired of being alone. She was tired of facing every challenge by herself, of having no one to share her victories or comfort her in her defeats. Over the next few days, Jasmine threw herself into work, trying to outrun her confusion. But everything reminded her of Samuel. The fence they had repaired together, the posts he had brought her, the roof they had mended. His presence was everywhere on her ranch, woven into the very fabric of the place. On the fourth day, Samuel rode over as usual. Jasmine was in the barn, mucking out stalls, and she looked up when she heard him enter. They stared at each other for a long moment, the air thick with unspoken words. "I cannot stop thinking about you," Samuel said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "I've tried to give you space, but Jasmine, I need to know, is there any chance for us?" Jasmine leaned on her pitchfork, suddenly exhausted. "I am scared, Samuel, scared of making a mistake, scared of losing what I have worked for, scared of getting hurt." "I am scared too," Samuel admitted, stepping closer. "I am scared of loving you and losing you, but I am more scared of never taking the chance at all. Life is short, Jasmine, we both know that, and happiness is rare. When you find it, you should hold on with both hands." Jasmine felt something break open inside her, all the walls she had carefully built crumbling in the face of Samuel's honest emotion. "I do not want to be alone anymore," she whispered. "I thought I did, but I do not. I want you, Samuel, I want us." Samuel crossed the distance between them in 2 strides and pulled Jasmine into his arms. She dropped the pitchfork and wrapped her arms around his neck, and then they were kissing, desperately and deeply, months of longing and denial pouring into that single moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Samuel rested his forehead against Jasmine's. "I love you," he said. "I think I have loved you since the day I found you mending that fence alone, too stubborn to ask for help." Jasmine laughed, a sound that was half sob. "I love you too. I did not want to, but I do." They stood holding each other for a long time, the barn filled with the sounds of horses shifting in their stalls and the wind rustling through the rafters. Finally, Samuel pulled back enough to look into Jasmine's eyes. "Marry me," he said. "Not because you need me or because I want to own you. Marry me because we are better together than apart." Jasmine felt a thrill of joy mixed with lingering fear. "I need time," she said. "I need to know this is real, that we can make it work." "Take all the time you need," Samuel said. "I am not going anywhere." They spent the rest of the afternoon working together, but everything felt different now. The air seemed charged with possibility, and Jasmine caught Samuel watching her with such tenderness that it made her heart ache. When he left that evening, he kissed her goodbye, a sweet, lingering kiss that left her wanting more. Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened. Samuel continued to help Jasmine with her ranch, but now their time together was punctuated by stolen kisses and long conversations about the future. They talked about how they might merge their operations, about what marriage would look like for two independent ranchers. Samuel made it clear that he had no intention of absorbing Jasmine's property into his own. Instead, they discussed ways to work together while maintaining their separate ownership. "I want you to always have something that is yours," Samuel explained one evening as they sat on his porch watching the stars. "Not because I do not trust us, but because you deserve that security. Your ranch is your legacy, and I would never take that from you." Jasmine leaned against his shoulder, feeling more content than she had in years. "You are unlike any man I have ever known." "Good," Samuel said, kissing the top of her head. "I would hate to be ordinary." Winter arrived early that year, with the first snow falling in mid-November. Jasmine had taken Samuel's advice seriously and had laid in substantial supplies, but she was still grateful for his proximity. When a blizzard trapped her in her house for 3 days, Samuel rode over as soon as the weather cleared, worried sick that something had happened to her. "I am fine," Jasmine laughed, pulling him inside and brushing snow from his coat. "I had food, firewood, and books. I was perfectly comfortable." "I was going crazy," Samuel admitted. "All I could think about was you alone here, possibly hurt or freezing." Jasmine kissed him, touched by his concern. "I am tougher than I look." "I know you are," Samuel said, "but let me worry about you anyway." As winter deepened, it became impractical for Samuel to ride back and forth as frequently. Jasmine spent more time at his ranch, often staying for dinner or spending the evening by the fire while Mrs. Chen fussed over both of them. The housekeeper had become an unlikely ally in their courtship, constantly finding excuses for Jasmine to stay longer or pushing Samuel to be more romantic. One snowy December evening, as Jasmine was preparing to ride home before dark, Mrs. Chen pulled her aside. "You should marry him," she said bluntly. "He is a good man and he loves you. Do not let fear keep you from happiness." Jasmine was taken aback by the directness. "It is not that simple." "It is exactly that simple," Mrs. Chen countered. "You love him, yes." "Yes," Jasmine admitted. "And he treats you well, respects you." "Yes." "Then what is problem?" Mrs. Chen asked. "You think love comes along every day. You think you will find better. I lost my husband young. I know what it means to waste time. Marry him, be happy. Life is too short for fear." Jasmine rode home that evening with Mrs. Chen's words echoing in her mind. The older woman was right. Jasmine had been letting fear control her decisions. Fear of losing her independence, fear of being hurt, fear of change. But what kind of life was that, always holding back, never taking risks? 2 days before Christmas, Jasmine rode to Samuel's ranch with a purpose. She found him in the barn, grooming one of his horses. He looked up with a smile when she entered, but the smile faded when he saw the serious expression on her face. "Is everything all right?" Samuel asked, immediately concerned. "Yes," Jasmine said, walking toward him. "Everything is perfect, actually. Samuel, I have been thinking about your proposal." Samuel went very still, hardly daring to breathe. "And?" "Yes," Jasmine said simply. "My answer is yes, I will marry you." The joy that lit up Samuel's face was worth all the weeks of uncertainty. He dropped the grooming brush and pulled Jasmine into his arms, spinning her around until she was laughing and begging him to put her down. "You will not regret this," Samuel promised, setting her on her feet but keeping his arms around her. "I will spend every day making sure you know how loved you are." "I know," Jasmine said, reaching up to cup his face. "I do know, Samuel. That is why I said yes." They decided to have a small wedding in late January, giving them time to make arrangements and for the word to spread to their scattered neighbors. Mrs. Chen immediately took charge of the planning, insisting that the ceremony be held at Samuel's ranch and that she would handle all the food preparation. Jasmine was touched by the older woman's enthusiasm and grateful for her help. The weeks leading up to the wedding were some of the happiest of Jasmine's life. She and Samuel spent every possible moment together, making plans for their future. They decided that Jasmine would move to Samuel's ranch after the wedding, as it was larger and better equipped, but they would continue to work both properties. Jasmine's ranch would focus on raising horses, which she had always been passionate about, while Samuel's would remain primarily cattle. On January 28, 1883, Jasmine Kendrick and Samuel Keller were married in the living room of the Keller ranch house. The room was packed with neighbors and friends, including several ranching families who had made the trek despite the winter weather. Jasmine wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Chen had helped her sew, and she carried a small bouquet of dried wildflowers. Samuel looked at her like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, and when they spoke their vows, his voice was thick with emotion. "I promise to stand beside you, not in front of you or behind you," he said. "I promise to respect your strength while offering mine. I promise to build a life with you where we are both free to be who we are meant to be." Jasmine fought back tears as she responded. "I promise to trust you with my heart, even when fear tells me to protect it. I promise to share my life with you, the good and the bad. I promise to be your partner in all things, for as long as we both shall live." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed Jasmine with a tenderness that made the assembled guests sigh. The rest of the evening was a blur of congratulations, food, and dancing. Jasmine danced with Samuel, with various neighbors, and even with a delighted Mrs. Chen, who declared it the best wedding she had ever attended. Late that night, after all the guests had departed or found places to sleep throughout the house, Samuel and Jasmine finally had a moment alone. They stood in Samuel's bedroom, which was now their bedroom, suddenly shy with each other despite everything they had shared. "Are you happy?" Samuel asked, reaching for Jasmine's hand. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Jasmine replied honestly. "I did not know I could feel this way." Samuel pulled her close, and she rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you, Mrs. Keller." "I love you too," Jasmine whispered, and then there were no more words, only the quiet intimacy of two people who had found their home in each other. The first year of their marriage was an adjustment, but a joyful one. Jasmine and Samuel learned to navigate the rhythms of shared life, discovering each other's quirks and habits. Samuel learned that Jasmine was not a morning person and needed at least 1 cup of coffee before she could be civil. Jasmine learned that Samuel was restless in his sleep and often woke before dawn to start work. They worked together on both ranches, rising early to handle chores and often working until after dark. It was exhausting, but also deeply satisfying. Jasmine had never imagined that partnership could feel this way, each of them contributing their strengths while supporting the other's weaknesses. When she struggled with a particularly difficult horse, Samuel was there with patient advice. When he faced a crisis with his cattle, Jasmine was there to help find solutions. Mrs. Chen continued to run the household, and she and Jasmine developed a close relationship. The older woman taught Jasmine traditional Chinese recipes alongside standard American fare, and Jasmine taught Mrs. Chen some of the techniques she had learned from her mother. The kitchen became a place of laughter and learning, filled with the smells of good food and the warmth of female friendship. In the spring, Jasmine discovered she was pregnant. The realization filled her with a mix of joy and terror. She had not really thought about children, too focused on building her ranch and then on her relationship with Samuel. But now, facing the reality of becoming a mother, she felt overwhelmed. Samuel was overjoyed when she told him the news, immediately becoming even more protective and attentive. "We are going to have a family," he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "I am scared," Jasmine admitted one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "I do not know if I will be a good mother." "You will be wonderful," Samuel assured her, taking her hand. "You are strong, patient, and loving. Our child will be lucky to have you." The pregnancy was difficult at times, with Jasmine experiencing intense morning sickness in the early months. But Samuel was patient and supportive, taking over many of her usual chores and making sure she rested when needed. Mrs. Chen became equally protective, constantly preparing special foods meant to strengthen mother and baby. As summer arrived and Jasmine's belly grew, she had to accept that she could not work as hard as she was used to. This was frustrating for someone accustomed to constant activity, but Samuel helped her find other ways to contribute. She took over the ranch's bookkeeping, which Samuel had always hated, and she began planning improvements to the horse breeding program. On a hot day in October, Jasmine went into labor. Samuel sent for the doctor in Ukiah and paced anxiously while Mrs. Chen helped Jasmine through the long hours of childbirth. When the baby finally arrived, a healthy boy with a powerful set of lungs, Samuel wept with relief and joy. "A son," he kept saying, holding the tiny bundle with awe. "We have a son." They named him Thomas, after Jasmine's uncle whose legacy had brought her to Montana. Thomas Keller was a strong baby, healthy and curious about the world from his first moments. Jasmine was overwhelmed by the fierce love she felt for this small person, a love that eclipsed everything else in its intensity. The first few months of parenthood were exhausting. Jasmine and Samuel took turns walking with Thomas when he fussed at night, both of them learning as they went. Mrs. Chen was invaluable, offering advice and taking the baby for a few hours each day so Jasmine could rest. "I do not know what we would do without you," Jasmine told Mrs. Chen one afternoon as she gratefully handed over a fussy Thomas. "You would manage," Mrs. Chen said with a smile. "But is better with help. Family is not just blood, is people who choose to stand by you." As Thomas grew, he became the center of their lives. Samuel was a devoted father, often carrying the baby with him as he worked around the ranch, talking to Thomas about cattle and horses as if the infant could understand. Jasmine loved watching them together, seeing the gentleness in Samuel's strong hands as he held their son. The years passed in a blur of work and family life. Thomas grew into a bright, active toddler with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determination. When he was 3, Jasmine discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she felt more confident, though Samuel was just as anxious and attentive as before. Their daughter was born on a spring morning in 1887, arriving quickly and with relatively little fuss. She had dark hair like her mother and her father's easy smile. They named her Caroline after Samuel's mother, who had died when he was young. With 2 young children, life became even more chaotic. But it was a good chaos, filled with laughter and love. Jasmine had never imagined herself as a mother of 2, but she found she was good at it. She was patient but firm, teaching her children early about responsibility and the value of hard work. Samuel was in his element with a growing family. He built a larger addition onto the house, creating proper bedrooms for the children and a bigger kitchen for Mrs. Chen. The ranch continued to prosper, with both the cattle and horse breeding operations doing well. They had become one of the most respected ranching families in the territory, known for their fair dealing and quality livestock. When Thomas was 6 and Caroline was 3, Jasmine and Samuel sat down to have a serious conversation about the future. "I have been thinking," Jasmine said, "about what we want to leave for our children. The ranch is doing well, but I want to make sure both properties stay in the family." Samuel nodded. "I have been thinking the same thing. What if we drew up papers officially creating the Keller Ranch Company? Both properties under one management but legally distinct. That way we could pass them to both children, not just Thomas." "I like that," Jasmine said. "I want Caroline to have the same opportunities as her brother. I do not want her to feel limited because she is a girl." "She will not be," Samuel promised. "Not if we have anything to say about it." They worked with a lawyer in Ukiah to create the necessary legal structure, ensuring that both children would inherit equally, and that Jasmine's property would remain distinct even as it functioned as part of the larger operation. It was important to both of them that they build something lasting, a legacy that would provide for their children and their children's children. As the 1890s approached, Montana was changing rapidly. The open range was being fenced, the railroad had reached Ukiah, and more settlers arrived every year. Samuel and Jasmine adapted to these changes, maintaining their independence while also participating in the growing community. Jasmine became involved in efforts to establish a proper school in Ukiah, traveling to town regularly to meet with other mothers and push for better educational opportunities. Samuel served on the Territorial Cattle Growers Association, helping to establish fair standards and combat rustling. Thomas grew into a serious, responsible boy who loved working with the cattle. He had inherited his father's natural way with animals and spent every possible moment learning the ranching business. Caroline, meanwhile, was more interested in the horses, showing an almost supernatural ability to understand and communicate with them. She was fearless in the saddle and could break a green horse with more patience and skill than many adult men. One evening, when Thomas was 10 and Caroline was 7, the family gathered around the dinner table as usual. Mrs. Chen, who had become more family than employee over the years, joined them as she always did. "Papa," Thomas said, his young face serious. "When I grow up, can I run the cattle operation, if that is what you want?" Samuel said, "but you have plenty of time to decide." "I want to work with the horses," Caroline announced, not to be outdone by her brother. "Like Mama does," Jasmine smiled at her daughter. "You are already very good with them. I would be happy to teach you everything I know." "What if I want to do something else?" Caroline asked suddenly. "What if I do not want to ranch?" Samuel and Jasmine exchanged a glance. "Then you do something else," Samuel said firmly. "The ranch is here if you want it, but you are not obligated to follow our path." "That is right," Jasmine added. "We want you to be happy, whatever that looks like." Caroline seemed satisfied with this answer, and the conversation moved on to other topics. But later, as Jasmine and Samuel prepared for bed, they talked about their children's futures. "You think they will stay?" Jasmine asked. "Or will they want to leave Montana and see the world?" "I do not know," Samuel admitted, "but we will support them either way. We raised them to be independent, to think for themselves. We cannot be surprised if they choose their own paths." "I suppose not," Jasmine said, snuggling closer to her husband. "It is strange to think they will grow up and leave us someday." "We have years yet," Samuel said, wrapping his arms around her. "Let us not borrow tomorrow's worries." The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and challenges. They lost Mrs. Chen in 1895 to pneumonia, a blow that devastated the entire family. The older woman had been a constant presence in their lives, and her absence left a void that was difficult to fill. They buried her on a hillside overlooking the ranch, a spot she had always loved for its view of the mountains. Thomas, at 16, had become a capable rancher, working alongside his father with the skill of someone much older. He was tall and strong, with Samuel's easy nature and Jasmine's determination. Caroline, at 13, was already an accomplished horsewoman and was beginning to take over more of the breeding program. She had her mother's independent streak and her father's charm, a combination that would serve her well. Jasmine, now 41 years old, looked back on her life with wonder. The frightened, lonely woman who had arrived in Montana all those years ago seemed like a different person. She had built a successful ranch, raised 2 wonderful children, and found a love deeper than she had ever imagined possible. She and Samuel had been married for 17 years, and she loved him more now than she had on their wedding day. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sun set as they had done thousands of times before, Jasmine reflected on their life together. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked Samuel. "Marrying me, taking on my problems, all of it." Samuel looked at her with surprise. "Not for one single moment. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Jasmine. You and our children, this life we built together. It is more than I ever dreamed of having." "I feel the same way," Jasmine said softly. "I was so scared when I met you, scared of losing my independence, scared of needing someone. But you taught me that true strength is not about doing everything alone. It is about knowing when to accept help, when to trust, when to love." Samuel took her hand, his touch still sending warmth through her after all these years. "You taught me that love does not mean possession, that you can share your life with someone without losing yourself. I am a better man because of you." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear, content in the life they had built. The ranch stretched out around them, a testament to their hard work and dedication. The sound of their children's laughter drifted from the house, where Thomas and Caroline were playing cards by the fire. "We did all right," Jasmine said. "We did better than all right," Samuel corrected. "We built something that will last." As the new century approached, Samuel and Jasmine began to step back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, allowing their children to take on more responsibility. Thomas, now 21, was more than capable of running the cattle operation. Caroline, at 18, had developed the horse breeding program into one of the most respected in Montana. She had a gift for matching bloodlines and training young horses, and buyers came from as far away as Wyoming to purchase her animals. In 1900, Thomas married a local girl named Sarah, the daughter of neighboring ranchers. It was a good match, and Sarah fit easily into the family, sharing Caroline's love of horses and quickly becoming like a sister to her. Samuel and Jasmine were delighted to have another daughter, and they welcomed Sarah with open arms. 2 years later, Caroline surprised everyone by announcing she wanted to attend the agricultural college that had been established in Bozeman. "I want to learn the science behind breeding," she explained. "I am good at it naturally, but I want to understand the theory to be able to do even better." Jasmine was proud of her daughter's ambition, even though she would miss having her at the ranch. "You should go," she encouraged. "Learn everything you can, then come back and make this program the best in the West." Caroline did exactly that, spending 2 years at college before returning to the ranch with new ideas and knowledge. She implemented selective breeding programs based on genetic theory, keeping detailed records and making breeding decisions with scientific precision. The quality of their horses improved dramatically, and their reputation spread even further. In 1905, Thomas and Sarah gave Samuel and Jasmine their first grandchild, a granddaughter they named Jasmine after her grandmother. The baby, called Jazzy by the family, became the center of attention, adored by everyone but especially by her namesake. Jasmine found being a grandmother even more rewarding than she had expected, able to enjoy the baby without the exhaustion of primary responsibility. More grandchildren followed over the next few years. Thomas and Sarah had 2 more children, a son named Samuel and another daughter called Rose. Caroline eventually married a veterinarian named David who had come to the ranch to treat a sick horse and had fallen in love with both the place and the youngest Keller. They had 3 children together, all of whom inherited their mother's way with animals. As Samuel and Jasmine entered their 60s, they truly retired from active ranching, though they remained involved in decision-making and planning. They spent their days enjoying their grandchildren, working in the garden Jasmine had always wanted but never had time for, and simply enjoying each other's company. On a warm summer evening in 1912, Samuel and Jasmine sat on their porch as the sun set, surrounded by 3 generations of family. Thomas was discussing cattle prices with David, while Sarah and Caroline planned the garden for next year. The grandchildren ran around the yard, their laughter filling the air. Jasmine leaned against Samuel's shoulder, feeling profoundly grateful for this life they had built. "Remember the day we met?" she asked. "When you found me trying to mend that fence alone. Best day of my life," Samuel said, kissing her forehead. "I saw you standing there, so determined and so alone, and something in my heart just knew. You were the one I had been waiting for without even knowing I was waiting." "I thought you were going to be a nuisance," Jasmine admitted with a laugh. "Another man trying to tell me what to do, but you never did that. You just offered to help, and you kept offering until I learned it was all right to accept. You taught me that strength comes in many forms," Samuel said. "That a woman can be every bit as capable as a man, and that partnership is better than possession." They watched as young Jazzy, now 7 years old, tried to teach her younger cousins how to rope a fence post. She was patient and encouraging, and Jasmine saw herself in the girl's determination. "We did good," Samuel said, echoing words they had spoken many times over the years. "We did very good," Jasmine agreed, taking his hand. As the stars began to appear and the family gradually moved inside for dinner, Samuel and Jasmine remained on the porch a few moments longer. The ranch stretched out before them, prosperous and thriving, a legacy built on hard work, mutual respect, and love. The fences they had mended together that first day were still standing, reinforced and maintained by children and grandchildren who had learned the value of taking care of what was important. Inside, someone called them for dinner, and they rose to join the family. Samuel held the door for Jasmine, and as she passed him, he pulled her close for a quick kiss. After 34 years of marriage, the gesture still made her heart skip. "I love you," he murmured against her hair. "I love you too," she replied. "Always have, always will." They walked inside together, hand in hand, ready to enjoy an evening surrounded by the family they had created and the love that had sustained them through 3 decades. The lonely rancher had found not just a woman mending fences alone, but a partner for life. And the independent woman who had thought she wanted to face the world alone had discovered that true strength was found not in isolation, but in choosing the right person to stand beside. Together, they had built something that would endure long after they were gone, a legacy of love, respect, and the courage to take a chance on happiness. The ranch would continue through their children and their children's children, but at its foundation would always be the simple truth that Samuel had seen on that August morning so long ago. Sometimes the best things in life come from stopping to help a stranger mend a fence.